Now, as you recall, Jesus and the disciples had set off across the Sea of Gennesaret, going over to the other side, and that as they traveled, a great storm arose. The winds and the waves beat down on the boat, and they were about to die. They were on the verge of going under, and the disciples look back, and there's Jesus asleep in the back of the boat. And they wake him up, and they say, "Don't you even care that we're about to perish?" Well, of course, Jesus cared that they were about to perish. Jesus cares for us. It's one of the defining characteristics of his being, right? You know, there are a lot of things that people have in common with one another, right? But there are also a lot of things that are different about us. Some of us are tall. Some of us are short. Some of us are thin. Some of us are, well, you know, not so thin. Thank you. We're different. Yeah? Some of us have been well educated. Some of us could use an education. Some of us behave wisely. Some of us behave foolishly. We have an endless differential degree of melanin in our skin. Yes? We come in different shapes, sizes, colors, and backgrounds. We have different opinions. We have different attitudes. We have different aptitudes. We have different abilities. We are diverse. We are, dare I say, unique. Can you imagine as many people as have lived upon the face of this earth, as many people as presently live on the face of this earth, and yet each of us has our own little design on the tip of our finger that belongs to us and us alone. But here's the thing. We all, saint and sinner, have one thing in common. One thing, and one thing only. We are all human. We're all human. I grew up in the 80s. And in the 80s, we had these poets who would set their words to music. And poets are often some of the most foolish or sometimes the wisest of us. Well, there's a particular piece of verse that stands out in my mind anytime I think of topics like this, and it goes something like this. People are people, so why should it be? You and I should get along so awfully. Right? How many of y'all remember that? Yeah. So I say that to say that as diverse and as different as we are, we have a certain commonality, and that commonality is that we are people. We're human beings. But God wasn't. God wasn't people. God wasn't a human being. And so that one thing that we all had in common, he did not share with us. We were created by him. We were made in his image, but we were still separated. We were different. We were people. He wasn't people. And so he became people. Jesus, the Son of God, the one who was in the beginning with God, the one through whom all things were created, the Word that we read about in John chapter 1, he became flesh and dwelt among us. And all of the things that we experience as people, he experienced too, only without sin. He was just as human as you or I, and yet divine. And so that thing that we all have in common, we can now also say we have in common with God, because he became a man just like we were, men and women. How awesome is that? And we see evidence of that reality by the fact that he was asleep in the back of the boat. Why was he sleeping in the back of the boat in the middle of a windstorm out on the ocean? It's because he was tired. And why wouldn't he be, with the crowds thronging around him? Of course he was tired. And when the disciples woke him up and said, don't you even care that we're perishing? He could have said, of course I care that you're perishing. That's why I'm here in the first place. Because you're all perishing. People say, how can a loving God send somebody to hell? The reality is a loving God doesn't send anybody to hell. We were already going there on our own. He came to give us an alternative. He came to open an escape hatch, the only escape hatch. You say, well, why is it that God only allows one way to be saved? Well, how about this? In the beginning, there was only one way to become lost. And if there's only one way to become lost, then it makes sense that there only would be one way to become saved, right? What was that one way? We were in the Garden of Eden. You can eat of any tree in the garden you want. It's all yours. There's just this one tree. Stay away from that one. Don't eat it. Because in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. It's the knowledge of good and evil, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what did we do? We became fruit pickers. We went and picked the fruit off the tree that we should not have taken the fruit off of. We took it, we ate it, we experienced for ourselves the knowledge of good and evil because we doubted God, we didn't believe his word, and we rebelled against him. And the result of our actions, the result of the actions of our first forefathers, Adam and Eve, the result of those actions was death. We complain, why does God let this happen, or why does that? When bad things happen 90% of the time, and I know I'm making that statistic up, but it sounds good, right? 90% of the time. How about this? Most of the time, the problems that we face in life are of whose creation? I am very overweight. Second fat joke I've made about myself today. I must be self-conscious. But did anybody else force feed me stuff I shouldn't be eating? So where I am is the result of the choices that I've made, right? Where I am is the result of the choices that I've made. I can't blame God for that. People say, why does a loving God send people to hell? He doesn't. He came to save us from hell. If we end up going there because we reject the only means to avoid it, that's our fault, not anybody else's, and certainly not God's. So he did care that they were perishing. That's why he came.